The 911 dispatch center was calm, operators chatting softly, paperwork being filed, until a call came through that would silence the entire room. On the other end was a trembling little girl, barely 7 years old, her voice no louder than a whisper. She said something that made the seasoned dispatcher's blood run cold. "My belly, it keeps moving." At first, it sounded like the confused words of a child, maybe just a stomach ache. But the more she spoke, the clearer it became. This was no ordinary emergency. What doctors later uncovered inside her shocked not only the hospital staff, but the entire community, unraveling a nightmare no one could have imagined. Where are you watching this story from? I love knowing where my viewers are tuning in across the world. Now let's begin this story. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Maplewood County, the kind of day where time itself seemed to move slower under the heavy blanket of summer heat. The cicadas hummed in the trees, their droning chorus filling the air outside, while inside the Maplewood Emergency Dispatch Center the atmosphere was routine, even dull. A handful of operators sat at their desks, their monitors glowing softly, their voices calm and measured as they took calls about fender benders, lost pets, and the occasional burst pipe. It was the kind of shift that lulled you into thinking nothing extraordinary would happen, a stretch of hours where the biggest disruption might be a farmer complaining about a cow wandering into the wrong pasture. Olivia Anderson, a veteran dispatcher with 15 years of experience, sipped lukewarm coffee from her chipped blue mug, her eyes half focused on the screen in front of her. She had seen and heard it all, or so she thought. Then the phone rang. Something about the sound made her spine straighten. It wasn't the tone of the ring, identical to every other call, but some instinct deep inside her seemed to whisper that this one would be different. Olivia clicked the headset into place and spoke in her usual warm but professional voice. 911, what's your emergency? For a moment there was only static, a faint crackle of silence that made her glance at her monitor to make sure the line was connected. And then a voice. Small, trembling, and fragile, like a whisper carried by the wind. "And my tummy." A pause followed by a shaky breath. "My tummy keeps moving." Olivia froze, her years of training kicking in even as her heart thudded faster. The caller was a child. A very young one, by the sound of it. She leaned forward, lowering her own voice to something soft and comforting, the way one might talk to their own child after a nightmare. "Sweetheart, it's okay. You've reached the emergency line. My name is Olivia. Can you tell me yours?" The little voice cracked with fear. Lily. My name is Lily Grace." A faint sob followed. "Something's wrong inside me. My belly, it hurts. And it's moving." Olivia felt her throat tighten. She had taken thousands of calls in her career. Children locked in cars, toddlers who had accidentally dialed 911 while playing with the phone, even kids who called as a prank because they thought it was funny. But this wasn't that. There was a raw, desperate terror in this child's voice, something no child should ever have to feel. "You're very brave for calling, Lily," Olivia said gently, her fingers already typing furiously across her keyboard to trace the location of the call. "Can you tell me where you are right now? Is your mommy or daddy with you?" There was a long pause, followed by another whisper, even smaller this time. "Mama's at work. She doesn't know about what's happening." Olivia's monitor pinged with the address, 1247 Oakwood Lane, a rural property on the outskirts of town. Registered to Sophia Thompson, single mother. Olivia remembered the name from previous calls. Nothing serious, mostly welfare checks when neighbors worried about the long hours Sophia worked. "Lily," Olivia continued softly, "I'm sending someone to help you right now. You don't have to be scared anymore, okay? Just stay on the line with me until they get there." But then Lily's voice dropped to something that made Olivia's blood run cold. "I can't talk too loud. If Uncle David hears me," she trailed off, breathing heavily into the phone. "He told me never to tell anyone about our special games. But now my tummy hurts too much. It keeps moving inside, and I don't know what to do." Olivia's stomach clenched. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't just a medical emergency. It was something far darker. She kept her tone steady, masking the horror boiling inside. "Sweetheart, you did the right thing by calling. You're very, very brave. Can you tell me if Uncle David is with you right now?" "No," Lily whispered. "He left this morning. He said he had to go to work at the warehouse. But he'll come back tonight." Olivia breathed a little easier, but only slightly. She quickly dispatched Officer Ben Carter, marking the call as high priority. Ben had been on the force for 8 years, steady and reliable, the kind of officer who treated people with compassion first and authority second. If anyone could handle this, it was him. Meanwhile, Olivia kept Lily talking. She asked about her favorite colors, her favorite toys, anything to keep her calm while her stomach was clearly in pain. Through the line, Olivia could hear the child's labored breathing, soft whimpers, and occasional sharp gasps as though something inside her truly was moving. Then Lily said something that twisted the knife deeper. I drew pictures to show Mama, but she's always too tired. She doesn't see them. I wanted her to know, but she doesn't. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, picturing a small girl scribbling desperate crayon drawings as her silent cry for help, pinned to a fridge no one had time to notice. It's okay, Lily, she said softly. You don't have to explain right now. Help is on the way. The faint sound of sirens grew in the background. Olivia smiled despite the tension tightening her chest. Do you hear that, Lily? That's Officer Ben. He's coming to see you. He's very kind, and he just wants to make sure you're okay. Lily sniffled. Will you stay with me until he gets here? I don't want to be alone. Of course I will, Olivia promised. I'm not going anywhere. But even as she said the words, her own thoughts raced ahead. What kind of man put a child in this position? What kind of game could leave a little girl clutching her stomach in agony, too scared to tell her mother? The worst possibilities churned in her mind: abuse, neglect, exploitation. She had to remind herself to stay focused, to keep her voice steady for Lily's sake. Finally, the sound of tires crunching over gravel filtered faintly through the phone. Do you see a police car, sweetheart? Olivia asked. Yes, Lily whispered. I see it. I'm in the backyard. Olivia let out a quiet breath of relief. That's Officer Ben. He's there to help you. You're not alone anymore. On the other end of the line, Ben Carter stepped out of his patrol car and adjusted his uniform. The house sat back from the road, modest and worn, with peeling white paint and a yard dotted with children's toys. The air felt strangely heavy, as if the place itself carried secrets. He had answered dozens of calls to rural homes just like this one, but something about this felt different, more personal, more urgent. He hadn't even seen the little girl yet, but the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. Olivia's tone over the radio had conveyed more than concern. She had been afraid. And if Olivia Anderson was afraid, something was seriously wrong. Ben closed the car door slowly and scanned the property. Somewhere behind the house, a small, wavering voice called out. Are you the policeman the nice lady said would come? Ben's chest tightened. He followed the sound toward the backyard, each step heavy with the sense that whatever waited for him here was about to change everything. The sound of the child's voice reached Officer Ben Carter before he even saw her. It was small, quivering, carrying a mixture of fear and hope that pierced through the heavy summer air. Are you the policeman the nice lady said would come? She asked, her words barely loud enough to carry across the yard. Ben stepped around the corner of the modest house, his boots crunching softly against the dry grass. There, on a weathered wooden swing that hung from the crooked arm of an old oak tree, sat the smallest and most fragile-looking child he had encountered in years of service. Her dress, a faded yellow with tiny flower prints, hung loose on her thin frame. Her dark hair fell in messy strands across her face, and both of her hands clutched tightly at her stomach as though trying to hold something inside. He stopped a few feet away, crouching slightly to lower himself to her level, careful not to startle her. Hi there, he said softly, his voice calm and steady, the way he had been trained to speak to frightened children. My name's Officer Carter, but you can call me Officer Ben if you'd like. The lady you spoke to, Olivia, told me you weren't feeling very well. Is that right? Lily's eyes lifted to his face. They were large, dark, and far too old for a 7-year-old child. Children's eyes were supposed to shine with curiosity and mischief, but hers carried a shadow, the kind of weight that came from secrets no child should have to keep. She nodded slowly, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. My tummy, it hurts really bad, she whispered. And there's something moving inside. It feels scary. Ben's chest tightened, but his expression remained calm and reassuring. I'm really glad you told us, Lily. That was very brave. He stayed crouched, hands resting on his knees, trying to make himself less imposing. Can you tell me how long your tummy has been hurting like this? She hesitated, her small fingers twisting the hem of her dress as though she was afraid of saying too much. Finally she answered, 2 days. It started after. Her voice broke, and she looked toward the house nervously, her lips pressing together as if holding back words she wasn't allowed to say. Ben waited patiently, giving her space. He had learned long ago that silence could be a powerful tool. Eventually, Lily whispered the words, her voice so faint he had to lean closer to hear them. After Uncle David came to visit, He said the games we played would make me feel funny for a while. But it's getting worse. Not better. The officer felt his jaw tighten, a surge of anger rising beneath his calm exterior. He forced himself to keep his voice gentle. Lily, where is your Uncle David right now? He left this morning before Mama went to work, she replied. He said he had to go to his job at the warehouse, but he'll come back tonight. Her eyes dropped again, her voice barely audible. He told me not to tell anyone about our special games. But I got so scared when my tummy started moving. I thought maybe I was gonna die. Ben swallowed hard, forcing the anger down. He couldn't let her see his fury, not when she was already so frightened. You did exactly the right thing by calling for help, Lily, he said firmly, his voice steady with conviction. You're not in trouble. Not at all. You're very, very brave. A flicker of relief crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by pain. She shifted on the swing, wincing as another wave of discomfort washed over her. That was enough for Ben. He reached for his radio and called in for an ambulance, lowering his voice so Lily wouldn't panic. Dispatch, this is Carter. I need EMS at 1247, Oakwood Lane immediately. Pediatric case, abdominal distress. Possible foul play involved. High priority. While they waited, Ben tried to keep Lily's mind occupied. Do you like to draw? He asked gently, noticing the faint smudges of crayon on her small hands. Her eyes lit up just a little. She nodded and slid her tiny backpack from the ground beside the swing. From inside, she pulled out several crumpled sheets of paper, all covered in childlike drawings. At first glance, they looked like the typical scribbles of any 7-year-old, bright colors, stick figures, uneven lines. But as Ben looked closer, his heart sank. One picture showed a small figure with long hair, clearly meant to be Lily, lying on a bed. Beside her stood a taller figure, drawn with heavy black crayon strokes. The taller figure had no smile, no friendly face, just hollow circles for eyes. In another drawing, Lily's small figure was crying while the larger one loomed over her. And in yet another, her small stick figure stomach was drawn with scribbles and dark lines inside, as if she was trying to capture something moving within her. Ben felt the breath leave his chest. These weren't just drawings. They were confessions, desperate attempts to communicate something her young mind couldn't put into words. He crouched lower, gently taking one of the pictures into his hands. Did you draw these for your mama? He asked softly. Lily nodded, her lip trembling. I put them on the fridge. But Mama works so much. She's always tired when she comes home. I don't think she saw them. Her voice carried no anger toward her mother, only sadness, as if she understood, even at 7 years old, how hard her mama worked just to keep their little world together. Before Ben could respond, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the heavy afternoon air. Lily's eyes widened with fear, and she gripped the swing's chains tighter. Am I in trouble for calling 911? She asked suddenly, her voice panicked. Uncle David said bad things would happen if I told anyone. He said I'd be taken away if I ever told. Ben leaned closer, looking directly into her frightened eyes. Lily, he said firmly, you are not in trouble. Not even a little bit. You did the bravest, smartest thing you could do. You called for help when you needed it. And because of that, we can make sure you're safe now. Do you understand? She sniffled, her small shoulders shaking. But what if Mama gets mad at me? Your mama loves you more than anything, Ben reassured her. She won't be mad. She'll be proud of you. And I'll be right here with you. You're not alone anymore. By then, the ambulance had pulled into the driveway, its red lights flashing in the sunlight. The back doors swung open, and paramedic Karen Davis stepped out. Karen was in her early 50s, with kind eyes and a calm presence that had soothed countless frightened patients over the years. She approached slowly, crouching down just as Ben had, careful not to overwhelm the child. Hello, beautiful girl, Karen said gently, her voice warm and soothing. My name's Karen. I hear your tummy isn't feeling so good. Can you tell me about it? Lily looked at Ben, who gave her an encouraging nod. It hurts a lot, she whispered. And it feels like something's moving inside. Karen's smile remained gentle, but her eyes flickered with concern. She reached out slowly, letting Lily see her hands before placing them lightly on the child's abdomen. Can I press just a little, sweetheart? I want to see what's going on, but I promise I'll be very gentle. Lily nodded nervously. As Karen examined her, Ben watched the paramedic's expression carefully. At first it was professional concentration, but soon her brows furrowed, her mouth tightened, and she looked up at Ben with a seriousness that told him everything. This child needs to be taken to the hospital immediately, Karen said quietly. Something isn't right, and it's urgent. Ben nodded, his heart sinking. He reached out his hand to Lily. How about we take a little ride together? The doctors at the hospital are going to help make that tummy ache go away. I'll come with you. You don't have to be scared. Lily hesitated, then placed her tiny hand in his. Her grip was surprisingly strong for such a small child, as if she was holding on to the one thread of safety she had left in the world. As Karen and her partner gently lifted Lily onto the stretcher, Ben stayed by her side. Her wide eyes searched his face as the paramedics secured her. You'll stay with me, right? She whispered. I'll be right there the whole time, Ben promised. I won't let anything bad happen to you. And as the ambulance doors closed with a heavy thud and the sirens began to wail once more, Ben Carter knew in his gut that this was only the beginning. Whatever had been happening to this little girl, whatever games her uncle had forced upon her, the truth was about to unravel. And when it did, it would shake their small town to its very core. The ambulance doors slammed shut with a metallic thud, sealing Lily inside as the sirens wailed to life. Officer Ben Carter followed close behind in his patrol car, the flashing red and blue lights painting streaks across the darkening Maplewood sky. Inside the ambulance, paramedic Karen Davis held Lily's tiny hand, her professional calm hiding the gnawing fear she felt in her gut. Lily whimpered occasionally, curling slightly against the stretcher as though trying to shield her stomach from the world. Every time the vehicle jolted, she winced. Her whispers to Karen were fragmented, confused, like a child struggling to describe something far too complex and frightening. By the time they reached St. Mary's Regional Hospital, night had fully descended. The emergency bay doors slid open, flooding the ambulance interior with cold fluorescent light. Doctors and nurses were already waiting. They had been briefed, a 7-year-old with severe abdominal pain and unexplained movement inside her stomach. Nobody knew yet what that meant, but the tension in their clipped footsteps said they feared the worst. Dr. Emily White, the attending ER physician, leaned over the gurney as Lily was wheeled inside. Her face was steady, but her eyes betrayed alarm as she glanced at the monitor, showing irregular spasms in Lily's abdomen. "What have we got?" she asked briskly. Karen replied quickly. 7-year-old female, acute abdominal distress, localized pain, patient reports movement sensation inside. Onset unclear. Patient pale, vitals unstable. Pain escalating. No external trauma noted. Dr. White nodded and barked orders. 4 fluids. CBC, CMP, abdominal ultrasound stat. Then she lowered her voice as she bent closer to Lily. "Hi, sweetheart. My name's Dr. White. You're very safe here. We're just going to take some pictures of your belly to see what's making it hurt." "Okay." Lily nodded weakly, her eyes glassy with exhaustion. She tried to speak but only whispered, "Is it bad?" Karen squeezed her hand. "You did the bravest thing calling for help. Now let us take care of you." Officer Ben stood at the edge of the room, out of the way but vigilant. His police training had taught him how to detach, how to stay cool in crises. But this was a child trembling under hospital lights, clutching a stuffed rabbit one of the nurses had hastily handed her. His jaw tightened as he remembered Olivia's voice on the dispatch line. If Olivia was afraid, something's very wrong. Minutes passed with machines humming and nurses moving swiftly. The ultrasound tech, a young man with sharp eyes, pressed the probe against Lily's abdomen. The screen flickered, shades of gray forming into images. At first, it looked ordinary: shadows, tissue, loops of intestine. But then he froze, his breath catching audibly. He adjusted the probe, pressed again, and the image sharpened. "Doctor," he murmured, his voice unsteady. Dr. White leaned in, eyes narrowing. What she saw made her blood run cold. There, nestled among Lily's organs, was something that didn't belong, an object. Rectangular edges. Symmetrical. It gleamed faintly against the grayscale monitor, unlike anything organic. "This isn't natural," Dr. White whispered. She turned to the pediatric chief on call, Dr. Samuel Brown, who had just entered the room. "Sam, you need to see this." Dr. Brown, a tall man with graying hair and decades of experience, studied the monitor silently. He adjusted the probe himself, scanning carefully. His brow furrowed deeper with every angle. Finally, he exhaled heavily and looked at Dr. White. "That's a foreign body," he said grimly. "And not just any foreign body. Look at the structure. It's mechanical, deliberately placed." The room went silent. Even the steady beep of the heart monitor seemed louder in the stillness. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances. Officer Ben stepped closer, his voice firm. "What does that mean exactly?" Dr. White swallowed. "It means someone put something inside her. surgically or otherwise. This wasn't an accident. The words struck like a thunderclap. Ben felt his fists clench at his sides. The air in the room seemed to thicken, suffocating. A 7-year-old girl, her stomach filled with pain, not because of illness or accident, but because someone had done this to her. Before anyone could say more, the automatic doors burst open. A woman stumbled in, her face pale, hair disheveled from rushing. Sophia Thompson, Lily's mother. She had been pulled from her late shift at the diner, frantic after hearing her daughter was hospitalized. Her apron still clung to her, stained with coffee and grease, her hands trembling as she pushed past staff. "Where is she? Where's my baby?" Sophia cried, her voice cracking. Ben gently stepped forward. "Ma'am, it's okay. She's right here. She's safe now." Sophia's eyes landed on the stretcher. She rushed to Lily's side, falling to her knees. Tears streamed down her face as she stroked the girl's hair. "Oh my God, Lily, what happened? What did you do to yourself, baby?" Lily's voice was small, almost apologetic. "Mama, I didn't do anything. I just called the nice lady, because my tummy hurts." Sophia looked up, confusion etched across her face. "Doctor? What's going on? Why is she here? Is she sick?" Dr. Brown hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Ms. Thompson, we found something inside Lily's abdomen. Something that shouldn't be there." Sophia's eyes widened. "Well, what do you mean?" Dr. White spoke softly but firmly. "We believe there is a foreign object, mechanical in nature. It appears to have been deliberately placed inside her body." The color drained from Sophia's face. She staggered backward as though struck. No, that's not possible. She's 7. She's a child. Who would?" Her voice broke, collapsing into sobs. She covered her mouth, shaking her head violently. No, not my baby." Lily reached for her mother's hand, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mama. Please don't be mad. I didn't want to get in trouble." Sophia dropped back to the bedside, gathering her daughter in her arms. No, sweet girl. You're not in trouble. You're never in trouble. I should have seen. I should have protected you." The sight pierced everyone in the room. Even hardened nurses turned away, their eyes misting. Dr. Brown cleared his throat. "We need to operate. Whatever this object is, it's dangerous. It could rupture tissue, cause infection, or worse. Time is critical." Sophia's tear-streaked face lifted. "Then do it. Do whatever you have to. Please, just save her." At that moment, Detective Mark Rivera and Child Protective Services caseworker Elaine Harper entered the room. Both had been called as soon as the ultrasound results came in. Their presence solidified the gravity of the situation. Detective Rivera, a broad-shouldered man with sharp eyes, pulled Officer Ben aside. "So it's confirmed? Someone put something inside this kid." Ben's jaw tightened. "That's what the doctors say. Mechanical. Deliberate." Rivera cursed under his breath. "Then this isn't just abuse. This is something bigger. Something calculated." Meanwhile, CPS caseworker Elaine Harper knelt by Sophia, her voice calm but firm. "Ms. Thompson, I know this is overwhelming, but we need to ask some hard questions. Do you know anyone who could have hurt Lily? Anyone who's been around her recently?" Sophia's face crumpled. She shook her head furiously. No one. Just me, her, and..." She froze, her words catching. "Her uncle, David. He watches her sometimes when I'm working." Ben's eyes flickered. The name again. The same name Olivia had relayed over dispatch. Uncle David. Rivera's jaw clenched. "Where is this uncle now?" Sophia's voice broke. "I don't know. He said he was working late. Please don't tell me he had anything to do with this." Ben and Rivera exchanged a grim look. Neither spoke the words, but both knew. The pieces were aligning in a chilling way. Back in the room, Dr. White and Dr. Brown prepared Lily for surgery. Nurses hurried to sterilize instruments, adjust monitors, and wheel the girl toward the operating theater. Sophia clung to her daughter's hand until the last possible second, whispering prayers under her breath, begging the universe to spare her little girl. As the doors closed behind the surgical team, the air in the hallway grew heavy with silence. Sophia collapsed into a chair, her sobs echoing down the sterile corridor. Officer Ben stood nearby, his fists still clenched, his mind replaying Lily's fragile voice on the call. "My tummy keeps moving." He felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. Detective Rivera broke the silence. "Whatever's inside that kid, we'll find out. And when we do, the person who put it there isn't walking away." And so, as the surgical lights flickered on and Lily drifted under anesthesia, The true horror of Maplewood County's darkest secret was only beginning to unfold. The sterile white walls of Maplewood General's operating theater glowed under the harsh surgical lights. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the room as Lily lay on the table, a tiny figure dwarfed by the machinery surrounding her. Dr. Emily White stood at the head of the surgical team, her hands steady despite the pounding in her chest. Beside her, Chief Pediatrician Dr. Brown prepared the instruments with methodical precision, his decades of experience visible in every calm, deliberate movement. They had removed foreign objects before, accidentally swallowed coins, small toys, even marbles, but never anything like what the scan suggested was inside this child. Sophia, Lily's mother, waited outside in the family lounge, her hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. She rocked forward and back, whispering silent prayers she hadn't spoken since childhood. Officer Ben Carter stood nearby, leaning against the wall, eyes fixed on the operating room doors. He'd seen shootings, fires, and car wrecks, but something about this case gnawed him differently. He wasn't just protecting a victim, he was protecting innocence itself. Inside the operating room, the surgeons worked in tense silence. The incision was made delicate and precise. Dr. White's gloved hands moved carefully, revealing something glinting faintly under the surgical lights. It wasn't organic. It wasn't anything that belonged inside a human body, much less a 7-year-old child. Gasps rippled across the team when Dr. Brown carefully extracted a small, metallic object. It was no larger than a quarter, smooth and disturbingly advanced. This is not medical equipment," Dr. White whispered, her brows furrowed as she placed it in a sterile tray. The object had tiny etchings, almost like circuit patterns, and a faint red light blinked at the center. The silence in the room was suffocating. Everyone understood the gravity of what they were seeing. Someone had deliberately implanted this device inside Lily. This wasn't an accident, nor was it any kind of toy she might have swallowed. This was deliberate, invasive, and deeply sinister. Dr. Brown looked at Dr. White, his voice heavy with disbelief. This isn't just mechanical, it's electronic. A microchip of some sort. Who would do something like this to a child? The operating room fell into a stunned hush. No one had an answer. When the surgery was over, Dr. White removed her gloves, her mind racing. She knew she had to inform the mother, the police, and Child Protective Services immediately. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever before. Outside, Sophia rose the moment the doors opened. Her face was streaked with tears, her body trembling. "Is she okay? Please, tell me my baby is okay," she begged. Dr. White crouched to her level, speaking gently but firmly. "Sophia, your daughter made it through surgery. She's stable and resting." But, she hesitated, searching for the right words. "We found something inside her. Something that should never have been there. A device." Sophia blinked, confusion painted across her face. "A device? What do you mean? Like a pacemaker? She's never needed anything like that." Dr. Brown stepped in, his tone somber. "No, not medical. This was something else entirely. We don't know why it was there, but it was deliberately implanted. It's electronic." The words hit Sophia like a freight train. Her knees buckled, and Officer Ben quickly caught her before she collapsed. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. No, not my Lily. She's just a child. Who would do this? Why?" Ben's jaw tightened as he exchanged a grim look with Dr. White. He didn't want to voice what they were all thinking, not yet. But his gut screamed the answer was obvious: Uncle David. Detectives Marcus Reed and Sarah Collins arrived shortly after, their badges flashing as they entered the waiting area. Reed was a veteran investigator, hardened by years of grim cases, while Collins was younger, sharp-eyed, and unafraid to ask the difficult questions others tiptoed around. They listened intently as Dr. White described the surgery and the device, their faces hardening with every detail. "Where's the device now?" Detective Reed asked. Dr. White handed him a sealed evidence bag containing the strange object. The faint blinking red light inside made it look even more ominous. "We didn't want to tamper with it," she explained. "But it's definitely active." Collins leaned closer, her expression grim. "Active? You're telling me this thing is transmitting something?" Dr. White nodded reluctantly. "That's our fear. We'll need forensics to analyze it, but yes, it seems to be sending out signals." The detectives exchanged a look. If the device was transmitting, that meant someone, somewhere, was watching or listening. Sophia, pale and trembling, looked up with wide eyes. Who would do this to my daughter? Who could?" Her voice cracked. She's just a little girl. Detective Collins crouched beside her, speaking gently. Sophia, is there anyone who has regular access to Lily besides you? Anyone you trust to watch her? Sophia swallowed hard, her lips trembling. For a moment she stayed silent, as though admitting it aloud would make it true. Finally she whispered, My brother, David. He's helped babysit her. I work double shifts at the diner sometimes, and I thought he was safe. He's her uncle. Her face crumpled in shame and disbelief. I trusted him. I never thought he'd, oh God. Ben clenched his fists tightly, fury surging through him. The image of Lily on the swing, clutching her stomach and whispering in pain, replayed in his mind. To think her own uncle might have done this, his blood boiled. Dr. White placed a comforting hand on Sophia's shoulder. You couldn't have known. Don't blame yourself. The important thing now is that Lily is safe, and we will get her the help she needs. But even as she spoke, a chilling thought hung in the air. If the device was transmitting, then Lily wasn't completely safe yet. Whoever had placed it might already know the hospital had removed it. Detective Reed stood tall, his voice cutting through the tension. We'll send this to forensics immediately. If this device was active, we need to know who's on the other end. This could be bigger than just David. The atmosphere in the hospital shifted. What had begun as a medical emergency was now unfolding into a criminal investigation of terrifying proportions. Child Protective Services was notified immediately. An agent named Laura Mitchell arrived, her expression one of controlled outrage as she listened to the details. She promised Sophia and Lily that the state would ensure their safety. Meanwhile, Officer Ben stayed close to Lily's bedside when she was wheeled into recovery. The little girl looked fragile under the hospital blankets, but her tiny hand still found his, gripping it as if he were her anchor in a storm. Am I safe now? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Ben forced a reassuring smile, though his eyes betrayed the storm raging inside him. Yes, Lily. You're safe now. I promise. Inside, though, he burned with anger. Safe? How could she truly be safe when someone had cut her open and placed a device inside her? How could a child's innocence be so violently stripped away? His mind returned again and again to the name David. Uncle David. If the evidence led there, Ben knew he would not rest until justice was served. Hours later, the forensics team called Detective Reed with preliminary findings. The chip wasn't just any electronic device. It was a transmitter and data storage unit, custom-built with sophistication far beyond anything homemade. It had been sending out periodic bursts of data to an unknown receiver. Reed's expression darkened as he delivered the news to the group. This thing wasn't just sitting there, it was broadcasting. Whoever put it in her body knows exactly where she is. They may even know we've removed it. Sophia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Dr. White's eyes widened. Even Ben felt his heart sink, the reality pressing down like a stone. That meant Lily was still in danger. The room fell into heavy silence, each person absorbing the implications. Lily wasn't just a victim of abuse, she was a target. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to implant technology inside a 7-year-old child. And now, with the device active, the people responsible were likely watching. Detective Collins spoke the words everyone feared. If they were monitoring her, they'll know we found out. Which means they might come looking. The cliffhanger loomed like a shadow over everyone. The hospital, the police, and Sophia herself now faced an enemy they couldn't yet see, one with resources and motives more sinister than they dared imagine. Lily's nightmare wasn't over. It might have only just begun. The morning after the surgery, the hospital corridors buzzed with whispers. Not from the usual chatter of nurses and doctors, but from detectives, officers, and protective services moving quietly yet urgently, piecing together fragments of a nightmare that had only begun to unfold. Detective Marcus Reed's first call that morning was to David Miller's workplace, a small hardware store on the edge of town where David had worked part-time for years. The store manager, Mr. Clark, sounded bewildered when Reed asked about David's attendance. He was here yesterday morning, Detective, Clark explained, his voice tight with unease. But around noon, he said he had an emergency. Packed up his things, left his apron on the counter, and walked out. He didn't even pick up his last paycheck. Reed's pen stopped mid-scribble. Did he say what the emergency was? Nothing. Just walked out. I thought maybe it was family stuff. He always talked about helping his sister, watching his niece. Never thought it could be something like this. By the time the police arrived at David's small rented home, he was gone. The place was oddly neat, too neat, as if he had planned his exit carefully. Drawers were emptied, clothing removed, and personal items stripped from shelves. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. Only the faint smell of cheap cologne and a half-empty mug of coffee on the counter gave any hint he had been there at all. Detective Sarah Collins walked slowly through the house, her gloves brushing across surfaces, her flashlight gliding over walls and empty bookshelves. "He cleared out," she muttered. "This wasn't panic. He planned this." Reed nodded grimly. "Which means he knew we'd be coming." Outside, Officer Ben Carter stood with a few neighbors who had gathered by the police tape, their faces etched with shock. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman from across the street, shook her head in disbelief. "David? No, he was such a quiet man. Always said hello, helped me carry my groceries sometimes. I can't believe he would do something to a child." Her voice cracked on the last words, her eyes wide with horror. Others whispered among themselves, fragments of disbelief and betrayal carried on the morning breeze. "He babysat her, didn't he?" one muttered. "If he could do this to his own niece, who's safe." Word spread quickly, though not publicly. Parents pulled their children a little closer, neighbors locked their doors earlier at night, and a cloud of unease settled over Maplewood like a storm. The idea that a trusted family member, a familiar face, could harbor something so dark unsettled everyone. Back at the hospital, Lily stirred in her bed, her small hand still clutching the stuffed bunny a nurse had given her. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw Officer Ben sitting by her side, she gave him a weak smile. "Hi," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Hey kiddo," Ben said softly, leaning forward. "How are you feeling?" Lily shrugged, her little brow furrowing. "My tummy hurts, but I feel lighter. Like something's gone." She paused, glancing around nervously. "Did I do something wrong? Is that why this happened to me?" Ben's chest tightened. He reached for her hand, holding it gently but firmly. "No, Lily. You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault. Do you hear me? You're the bravest little girl I've ever met." Tears welled in her eyes. "But Uncle David always told me to be quiet. He said people wouldn't believe me if I talked." Ben swallowed hard, rage flaring inside him, but he forced his voice to stay calm. "You don't have to listen to him anymore. You're safe now. And we believe you. Every word." Sophia, sitting by the bedside, broke down silently, her tears sliding down her cheeks as she listened to her daughter's innocent yet heartbreaking words. She had trusted David, her own brother, with Lily's safety. And now her child was left with scars both visible and invisible. Meanwhile, the investigation into David's past deepened. Detectives Reed and Collins pulled his employment records, his bank statements, and his old acquaintances. What they found sent chills through them. David's financial records revealed a series of unexplained wire transfers over the last 3 years. The amounts were small enough not to trigger alarms, $200 here, $500 there, but consistent, always routed through obscure payment services, often in cash withdrawals soon after. The trail led nowhere conclusive, but it suggested he had been receiving steady payments from someone. Even more disturbing were his internet activities. His laptop, recovered from the back of a pawn shop where he had apparently sold it days before, was encrypted but not impenetrable. Forensics uncovered fragments of deleted files, search histories tied to anonymous forums, and chat logs in dark corners of the internet. There were discussions about subjects, implantation procedures, and coded references to testing. Collins slammed the file shut, disgust etched across her face. "This isn't random. He's part of something organized. Some group." Reed rubbed his temples. "The question is, how deep does this go? And how many kids have been hurt?" As they dug further, whispers of a shadowy organization surfaced, an underground network that thrived on experimentation, trafficking, and control. They called themselves the Circle, a name that popped up repeatedly in obscure files tied to David's online aliases. Nothing concrete, but enough to suggest Lily wasn't the first child targeted. The idea made everyone's blood run cold. One evening, Detective Collins visited Sophia at the hospital to update her. Lily was asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with the rhythm of exhausted dreams. Sophia, her face pale from sleepless nights, looked at Collins with desperate eyes. "You're going to find him, aren't you? You'll catch David before he can hurt anyone else." Collins hesitated. She wanted to promise, to reassure, but the truth weighed heavy. "We're doing everything we can, Sophia. We won't stop until he's found." Sophia nodded, but her hands trembled as she stroked Lily's hair. "I just don't understand. He was my brother. We grew up in the same house. How could he become this?" Collins didn't answer. Some questions had no comforting replies. Meanwhile, Officer Ben threw himself into the search with relentless determination. He drove to every place David was known to frequent, interviewed old friends, and checked security cameras across town. Each lead seemed to dissolve into smoke. David had vanished, leaving behind a trail designed to mislead. But then came the breakthrough. Forensics confirmed that the microchip removed from Lily was not only transmitting location data, but also storing biometric readings, heart rate, body temperature, even stress indicators. It was a monitoring device, designed to keep track of a child's physical state in real time. And worse, fragments of code inside the device suggested it was part of a network. This wasn't just about Lily, Reed said grimly during the briefing. This was a test run, a piece of a larger operation. Collins leaned forward, her voice tense. And if David was only the handler, then someone else is pulling the strings. The room fell silent. The implication was chilling. David wasn't working alone. Back at the hospital, Lily awoke from a nap, her big eyes looking at her mother. "Mommy," she whispered, "are there other kids like me? Did they hurt them too?" Sophia froze, her heart breaking at the question. She didn't know how to answer. She didn't want to lie, but she couldn't crush her daughter's fragile hope either. Before she could respond, Officer Ben stepped in, his expression firm. "That's what we're going to find out, Lily. And we're going to make sure they never hurt anyone else again. I promise." But as he said the words, the truth gnawed at him. The evidence was pointing to something bigger than they had imagined, and Lily might only be the beginning. The cliffhanger arrived in the form of a late-night call. Reed and Collins were in the precinct when the phone rang, another forensic update. The data recovered from David's laptop revealed multiple files, each labeled with different children's names, ages, and coded medical notes. Lily's name was only one among many. Reed stared at the screen, his blood running cold. God help us. He wasn't working alone, and she wasn't the only one. The storm that had hovered over Maplewood for days finally broke with the sound of sirens and the pounding of boots on wet pavement. Detective Reed and Officer Ben had been tracking leads relentlessly, following scraps of data recovered from David's laptop. The latest tip placed him near an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, a place that once hummed with the noise of machinery, now reduced to rust, shadows, and secrets. Rain fell in sheets as the officers surrounded the building, their radios crackling with terse updates. The factory loomed ahead like a skeleton in the dark, windows shattered, walls marked with graffiti, and an eerie silence that made every footstep echo louder than it should. Reed's voice cut through the tension. "We've got reason to believe he's inside. Be ready, this isn't just about David. There could be others." Flashlights cut through the gloom as the team advanced. Inside, the factory smelled of mold, oil, and something sharper, like disinfectant mixed with decay. Old filing cabinets were overturned, scattered with papers. In one corner, crude medical equipment sat on tables, syringes, wires, and a stack of manila folders labeled with children's names. Officer Ben's stomach clenched. This was the proof. David hadn't acted alone. This was a hub, a node in a network that preyed on innocence. Suddenly a sound, a metal door slamming shut deeper inside the factory. Reed signaled silently. The team moved, weapons drawn, every nerve straining. They reached the back hall just in time to see David sprinting through the shadows, his figure hunched, a bag clutched in one hand. "David! Stop!" Reed shouted, his voice thundering in the empty halls. David didn't stop. He bolted for a side exit, feet pounding against the cracked concrete floor. Officers gave chase, their flashlights bouncing wildly. The chase spilled out into the rain-soaked night, down an alley behind the factory. David stumbled, slipped in the mud, and scrambled to his feet again, but the officers were closing in. Ben surged forward, adrenaline burning through him. With one final leap, he tackled David to the ground, pinning his arms. The bag flew from David's grip, scattering papers and small metallic devices into the puddles. "Get off me!" David screamed, thrashing violently. His face twisted with rage, but there was fear in his eyes too, the fear of a man cornered, exposed. Ben pressed him down firmly, his voice cold. "It's over, David. You're not hurting anyone else." Reed cuffed him as backup swarmed, securing the perimeter. David's screams faded into bitter mutters as he was hauled to his feet, soaked and defeated. Inside the bag, detectives found hard drives, ledgers, and more detailed files of children, photographs, medical notes, maps. The evidence was damning. Not only had David implanted his own niece, but he had been working with the Circle, supplying them with data and victims. The arrest sent shockwaves through Maplewood. News spread quickly. The quiet, helpful uncle was not only guilty but part of something monstrous. Yet amid the horror, there was a strange relief. He had been caught. The nightmare had a face, and that face was now behind bars. At the hospital, Sophia received the news of David's arrest. Relief washed over her like a tide, but so did sorrow. She wept openly, clutching Lily's hand as she whispered, "It's done, sweetheart. He can't hurt you anymore." The doctors reassured her that Lily's recovery was going well. Physically, she would heal. The surgery had removed the foreign device completely, and her body was regaining strength. But emotionally, the road ahead would be longer. Counselors and child psychologists were already working with Sophia to ensure Lily would get the support she needed. One afternoon, as the golden rays of sunset streamed into her hospital room, Lily looked up at her mother with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy," she whispered, "am I broken now?" Sophia's heart shattered, but she smiled through tears, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "No, my love, you're not broken. You're the bravest girl I know. Stronger than anyone." Officer Ben, sitting quietly in the corner, added softly, "She's right, Lily. You're a hero. Because of you, we found him. Because of you, other kids will be safe." Lily smiled faintly, hugging her bunny closer. For the first time in days, her tiny shoulders seemed to relax. It was during one of those hospital evenings that Sophia finally turned to Officer Ben, tears brimming in her exhausted eyes. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice trembling. "From the very beginning. You didn't leave us, not once. You became her anchor when everything else was falling apart." Ben swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. I couldn't walk away. Not when I saw her courage. She deserves to know she's safe, that people care." Sophia reached out, her hand brushing his arm. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "For believing her. For believing us. For saving my daughter's life." Ben looked at Lily, who was now peacefully asleep. "She saved herself, Sophia. She picked up that phone. She called for help. She's the real hero here." In the days that followed, Maplewood transformed. The community, once fractured by whispers and fear, came together with a fierce determination. Parents held meetings at the school to learn how to better protect their children. Flyers about child safety, online dangers, and signs of abuse were distributed. Local charities raised funds to support victims of trafficking and exploitation. At a candlelight vigil held outside the hospital, hundreds gathered. They held candles in the dark, their faces illuminated by the soft glow, as prayers and promises echoed through the night. "Never again," the mayor declared, her voice steady. "Never again will we allow our children to be preyed upon in silence. Lily's bravery will light the way for us all." Sophia stood in the crowd, holding Lily in her arms, her heart swelling with both pride and sorrow. She knew the scars would remain, but she also knew they were not alone anymore. As the narrator's voice carries us to the end, the story circles back to where it began, with a little girl's trembling hand holding a phone, dialing 3 simple numbers, 911. That call, made out of fear and desperation, became the turning point not only for Lily but for countless others who may never even know her name. It wasn't the police, the detectives, or even the community that sparked this change. It was Lily, a child who found her voice in the darkest moment, who believed someone would come, and who proved that even the smallest act of courage can ripple into something far greater. Because of her, a predator was stopped. Because of her, a community awoke. And because of her, hope replaced despair. Lily's story is a reminder that heroes come in all sizes. Sometimes they are only 6 years old, clutching a stuffed bunny, whispering into a phone, "Help me." And so, our story closes not with despair, but with light, with the courage of a child, the dedication of those who fought for her, and the healing of a community that refused to be broken. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more such powerful storytelling. Your support helps us bring more voices, more courage, and more hope into the light. Thank you for watching.